Our tariffs will remain in place until the U.S. tariffs are withdrawn, and not a moment sooner.
We are fighting these tariffs with counter tariffs of our own, the American tariffs. Tariffs that will cause maximum pain in the United States, but have minimum impact here in Canada.
Double tariffs on steel and aluminum, hiking the tax from 25% to 50%.
We don't want America's future to be built with shoddy steel from Shanghai. We want
Canada to work together to boost internal trade in the face of instability.
Canada just made a decision that has shaken the foundations of North America. For nearly a century, the U.S. and Canada have stood side by side as the closest allies in the world. A partnership built on trust, trade, and shared values. But all of that changed overnight. With one announcement, one brutal tariff hike, Canada signaled something unthinkable. The friendship is over. And while most Americans were distracted by social media drama and election theater, a geopolitical earthquake was unfolding right under their noses. This isn't just about steel. This isn't just about trade. This is about the collapse of North America as we know it. It began with tariffs. On paper, tariffs sound boring, just another policy move. But in reality, they're weapons, economic weapons. And the U.S. just pointed them directly at Canada. First came a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. Painful, but not lethal. Canadian executives braced themselves. They've endured recessions, market crashes, trade disputes. They thought they could weather this one too. Emergency meetings were held. Shipments were paused. Budgets were cut. The industry thought, we can ride this storm out. But then came the real blow. Out of nowhere, the U.S. announced the tariff would be doubled, from 25% to 50%. No warnings, no backroom diplomacy, just a press conference delivered like a reality TV reveal. For Canada, this wasn't economics anymore. It was betrayal. For decades, the two countries had trusted each other with everything from defense to infrastructure. Now, overnight, Canada's lifeline was strangled. Half of America's steel imports come from Canada. Cars, construction, planes, bridges. North America's backbone was built on Canadian metal. And suddenly, the flow stopped cold. The longest undefended border in the world had turned into something else entirely. A wall of mistrust.
To understand the weight of this rupture, you have to look at the scale of the partnership. Canada sends roughly 75% of its defense spending straight into the United States, billions of dollars each year. And in return, America sells weapons, security systems, and military gear. This wasn't just about steel. It was about trust. Canada had always believed its closest neighbor would never turn on it. Workers in Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta built their livelihoods on supplying American industries. Generations of families believed they were part of a shared destiny. But after this tariff betrayal, that dream collapsed. It wasn't just a disagreement. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was a divorce. And like all messy breakups, there would be no winners, only survivors. Here's where the story takes a fascinating twist. While Trump was firing off tweets at 3 a.m., Mark Carney, the newly appointed Canadian Prime Minister, was plotting something far more strategic. Carney isn't your typical politician. He's not a populist, not a firebrand, not someone chasing applause. He's a technocrat, an economist, a strategist. Educated at Oxford, former governor of the Bank of England, former governor of the Bank of Canada. A man who steered economies through global financial crises. So, when the U.S. tried to corner Canada, Carney didn't take the bait. He didn't waste time trading insults on Twitter. He didn't rush to hold angry press conferences. He did something smarter. He booked flights. Not to Washington, but to Paris, to London, to Brussels. And in hushed meetings behind closed doors, he began crafting a declaration that would change the global balance of power. Canada would pivot to Europe. He declared, "We are the most European of non-European countries." This wasn't just rhetoric. It was a blueprint. While America was flexing with tariffs, Europe was quietly building something massive, a $900 billion defense independence project known as Rearm Europe. The goal? To create a European defense system not reliant on Russia, and not reliant on America either. And who was the first non-European country to join? Canada. For 70 years, NATO had been built around American leadership. Allies bought U.S. weapons, followed U.S. strategies, and relied on U.S. protection. But under Trump, that trust didn't just erode, it shattered. Think of the psychology. You're spending billions every year buying weapons from someone who is simultaneously sabotaging your economy. It's like paying protection money to a bully who keeps punching you in the face. Carney saw the madness in this arrangement, and while Trump was playing checkers with tariffs, Carney was playing chess with continents. It's easy to talk about tariffs in the abstract. Numbers, percentages, trade flows. But this story is about people. In Michigan, auto factories that have relied on Canadian steel for decades suddenly faced shortages. Production lines stalled. Costs skyrocketed. Workers were sent home. In Ohio, billion-dollar construction projects ground to a halt. Developers couldn't get the steel they needed. Timelines collapsed. Investors panicked. In Missouri, aerospace companies faced critical material shortages. Military jets and commercial airplanes were left half-built, waiting for parts that weren't coming. This wasn't just theory. It was reality. And here's the kicker. Even if tariffs were lifted tomorrow, the damage is permanent. In global trade, once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Canadian steel executives weren't exaggerating when they called the tariffs a punch in the gut. They were being brutally realistic. And the irony? While Trump was applauded for protecting American steel, he was actually suffocating it. Cutting off your biggest supplier isn't strength. It's sabotage.
But here's where things get even bigger. Canada's pivot wasn't an isolated move. It was part of a larger global pattern. Around the world, countries were quietly adapting to the reality that America was no longer reliable. South Korea deepened trade ties with China. Japan expanded partnerships across Southeast Asia. Germany began building energy systems designed to bypass American influence entirely. This wasn't the US versus Canada anymore. This was the world shifting away from American dominance. History tells us that great empires rarely collapse because of external threats alone. More often, they crumble because of arrogance, believing allies can be mistreated forever. The British Empire, the Soviet Union, both thought they were too big to fail. Both were wrong. Now, America risks making the same mistake. For decades, NAFTA symbolized the seamless integration of North America. Goods, services, ideas, and people flowed freely across borders. It wasn't just policy, it was daily life. Families lived cross-border lives. Companies relied on binational supply chains. Students studied in each other's universities. The border was little more than an invisible line on a map. That system took 40 years to build, and it was destroyed in months. Drive through Detroit and Windsor. Walk across the Niagara region. These aren't just neighboring cities. They're one economic zone. And yet, political theater is tearing them apart. Trump promised to make America great again. But what he delivered was America alone. And in today's interconnected world, alone means weak.
The question now is simple. What happens next? For Canada, the answer is clear. With Europe, with Asia, with new partners rising, they'll have options. Leverage, independence, security outside of America's shadow. For the U.S., the outlook is far darker. If allies like Canada can no longer be trusted partners, then who can? And here's the haunting truth. While America burns bridges,
China is quietly building new ones. With its Belt and Road Initiative, with strategic investments across Asia, Africa, and Europe, China is constructing an alternative world order. A world where America isn't the center. A world where America isn't even necessary. So ask yourself this: is this the moment America begins its decline? Or is it the wake-up call that forces the US to adapt, to rebuild trust, and to find its place in a multipolar world? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about steel. It's about the end of an era. The end of American dominance. The end of North American unity. But it's also the beginning of something else. A global reordering that will shape the next century. And in our next video, we'll dive into the one country poised to benefit most from America's chaos: China. While Washington was busy burning alliances, Beijing was busy building an empire. And the moves they've made will shock you. So before you click away, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Because what's coming next will decide the future of global power, and your future too.